Hey guys, thanks for being with us on another episode of Emergent Leadership. Tonight, I am fortunate to be with one of our youngest and earliest in his career of leadership guests. His name is Chris Gaeta. Chris, how are you this morning tonight?
Morning. It's morning somewhere. I'm doing well. Doing well.
Good, good. So Chris is coming to us. We got connected on LinkedIn. He's got a really interesting story. So we got connected. I want to share him with you guys. Chris is in Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's really involved already in EMS. So a third year college student with a couple things going on. So I don't want to take all your thunder, Chris. If you'll kind of share with us, how do you connect into EMS and some of the things that you're doing while you're still in school?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I'll give the 360 view a bit about myself and then the EMS relation. So, like you mentioned, I'm a junior at Swarthmore College studying neuroscience there and also getting a master's at UPenn's med school in bioethics. So I kind of stumbled into EMS when a friend told me, hey, like you're interested in medicine. Let's take this class over the summer before college. I heard it was interesting. I had absolutely no background in EMS, hardly knew anything about it. It ended up obviously being pretty impactful, continuing just about every day now since I took that class. And so the interest in medicine was kind of bridged with having the ability to have this in-person sort of patient care experience. So I was hooked pretty instantly to it. I really like the environment of having that urgent case or that urgent setting right in front of you. And then like at this age, having the ability to have that patient care interaction. I think it's a really good way for all undergrads in college to see if they like medicine because there's definitely there's benefits to the classroom bench work and cell biology and all that I was going to say good stuff, but all that interesting stuff. And then, having the ability to have that patient care experience. That's why I'm super excited about kind of EMS in the collegiate setting. And then particularly kind of my roles in EMT.
Right.
Um, yeah.
So
So
are you currently, so you got your EMT before you started college. So you've been are you EMT? I'm not familiar with the system up there. Are you a basic
yeah,
or they have
basic.
advanced?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you're an EMT basic. You started, so you got your EMT before you went into college. So you've been an
Right.
EMT for 3 years now.
Yep.
So what do you do with your license? Are you practicing?
For sure. So I started right when I got it, like the week I got to college, finished everything, finally got the EMT. And so I've been running with Swarthmore, Pennsylvania's Fire and Rescue Squad since then as a volunteer. And also right about since October or November of 2018, I've been working at Crozier Health, which is a level 2 trauma center in Chester, Pennsylvania. It's
Hmm.
an awesome environment, great teaching environment, and just in general, great place for EMS and a great place to kind of facilitate research and learning.
Sure.
And so that has kind of been the bridge of like uh, being a volunteer, doing EMS research. And the third kind of loop to that was involvement as of, I think, about 2 years ago with an organization called NCEMSF. It took me about a year to get the acronym correct, but I'm glad I finally have it.
I
So,
appreciate that you dropped that for me so I didn't have to mess it up for us
no,
because
no worries.
alphabet
But
soup in EMS for sure, especially with the organization. So NCEMSF. So it's National Collegiate EMS Foundation.
perfect.
Okay.
Awesome.
So you're a
Both
part of
person
that
already.
that group.
Yeah.
And when you and I connected, Chris, I'd never heard of that group. I mean, myself, I wasn't involved in EMS pre. I mean, I didn't get involved until post graduation. I kind of landed in EMS, so that was new to me. I'm not sure if many of our listeners are familiar with that organization. Do you mind kind of sharing what they
Absolutely.
do? How do you get involved? How many schools? Any of that kind of information that you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 250 colleges a part of the foundation across the country. I think it was founded in like early 90s, I believe. And the goal of it is facilitating like just information and kind of advocacy work for on-campus collegiate-based EMS organizations. and almost always those are student volunteer run. And so that's another thing that folks usually are not shocked, but didn't know before. So a lot of college campuses, and I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of them kind of with, some strategic stuff, ways for them to advocate for funding and other things like that. Almost all of them have to run on student-run budgeting, student-run credentialing, student-run outreach, with attempting to get all that through their school. And it's a really incredible environment because it allows undergrads from really small schools like mine, small liberal arts school, up to the larger schools like Penn, Drexel, what have you, all the UCLA. The ability to have that teamwork environment, sort of like having a job basically, while still an undergrad, having that ability again for patient care, and all those interactions are, pretty unique. And so we have an annual conference every year, usually in about February-ish. I don't think we're in person this year, but let's hope that changes. I hope we are going to be in person, but that usually attracts about 1,000 folks, and everyone from industry, medical directors, obviously student providers, and that's an awesome time for people to really exchange information, get together, talk about research, or just interesting things in college EMS. And the managing the board of directors is, it's a really interesting and strong group of folks, almost all docs or medics that were student providers when they were undergrads, and really loyal and just awesome resources to have. So
that's great. So you're pretty involved. You're in school, third year, pre-med. You're doing a second education kind of path with your medical school. You're taking some courses for your master's.
Yep.
In neuroscience. You're part of this organization, so obviously you're well into EMS. I'm always curious to know, when you talk to your friend and he said, "Hey, let's take this class," did you imagine that you'd be so involved, it would be such a critical part of your college journey?
Yep. So I, truth be told, thought I wouldn't even finish the EMT class. I was like, this is not for me. There's no way. This is like 8 a.m. to like 4 p.m. every day for the whole summer. Are you kidding me?
It wasn't
I want to rest.
just the schedule.
Right. I want to rest. I'm on the golf team at Swarthmore. So I was like, I want to golf. I don't want to, do anything. I want to just rest before college. And, it was one of those really instant things. I absolutely loved it. I think what's great about EMS is age is kind of not, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but not a super critical factor to having a leadership role. So I've been super lucky at NCMSF to kind of work my way up with them to run their operations for the medical journal, a part of the foundation. So to throw another acronym at you for the quiz at the end, JCEMS, JCEMSF, JCEMS, no F, Journal of Collegiate Emergency Medicine, Emergency Medical Services. So that's a group of us that started the medical journal kind of as like a subset of the larger organization. And it kind of stemmed from, so the editor-in-chief is currently now a med student, second year at Stanford. And when he was an undergrad, he was interested in research, but didn't have, a lot of tools to learn about it, carry it out, and go through the process. And so what we kind of hope to do at JChems is combine sort of like a mentorship program with the ability for students to have really kind of unique feedback from a medical journal if they're submitting to us. So such that like we usually call them and talk through their submissions, which you usually don't get from medical publications. So we believe in that kind of like one-on-one feedback process. And so, for example, we have a lot of students who, if they come to us with a public health interest, we match them with a mentor that's a public health, physician out by their university, and kind of foster relationships and just advice in general in that capacity.
That's huge. So of course, my head is in, how can my audience, how can we help support this. One of the biggest challenges that we see in this industry that you may or may not know is staffing. And all the challenges that come. Obviously, the Affordable Care Act overnight caused a physician shortage, a lot of clinical shortages that happened 10 years ago almost, and definitely 10 years ago. And we're still catching up, right? And so there's all these challenges, and now add COVID on top of that.
Sure.
That there are a lot of markets that are struggling to find paramedics, or struggling to find EMTs, and they're just kind of at a loss. And so I know one of the big places that people have identified as an opportunity for building not just recruiting, but also building culture is in universities and in colleges. And so taking a step back from not just who's interested in our industry, but how do we build interest in this industry? And it sounds like that journal and this organization that you're a part of could be instrumental, in making that happen. And so how do we as an industry support the initiatives that you guys have going? Today, how do people plug into that?
For sure. So, definitely a few ways to get involved. One is participating kind of in that process of reading, interacting with both organizations. The national conference that we have every year is, a great way to also kind of expand on that and grow an individual's network, and also potentially kind of, have that ability to be a mentor if that's kind of an appropriate role. I think one really interesting thing that I'm really fortunate that we've been able to kind of foster and develop at the journal is we're a really diverse team in terms of, myself. We have a Navy engineer, a med student, current student EMTs, a statistician at MIT, just these random people in a great way. And so that ability to kind of anyone comes to us and has a pretty niche interest, our goal and my hope is that we're able to kind of innovate in the sense of, guiding them in the right space, saying, okay, talk to Mike, or no, talk to Joe,
Right.
and having that ability to match interests. Because if you think it doesn't align, my goal is to make your interests align in the pre-hospital care or EMS kind of capacity.
Mm-hmm. So clearly you've taken on a leadership role before you've really moved into a technical leadership role. And I think, your path may even look a little bit different going into med school, doing, pre-med, you're in undergrad, right? Third year in college. But you're 3 steps ahead, I think, of a lot of other people. And I see that in you, and I appreciate that, right? That was, I think, a lot of people in our industry jumped straight in and didn't have this kind of intro into. So I'm curious to know, Chris, as you've kind of dove into this and you see what you think you see in the industry, or know what you think you know, what some of those truths are that you've experienced already that have kind of pulled you in, or kept you engaged in, really emergency services?
Yep. So definitely a few things there. I would say the breadth of opportunities it's massive. Very few industries where a 20-year-old can go in and say, I really want to dive into like frontlines research of like translational research about, headache management in a pre-hospital set, like whatever that is. So there's the research capacity. There's the provider lens to it, where, EMT versus EMT advanced, and kind of going up that certification, ladder, for lack of a better term. There's the entire provider side of it. And then the third side of it, which is something I have an interest in, is the organizational and kind of zoomed out version of it. So the leadership and in that capacity. So not necessarily the clinical and patient care side of it, but organizationally running these systems and kind of having that management position.
Mhm.
It's super rewarding and interesting. And I think you have to be a provider and EMT to appreciate an organization if you're on that other end of the leadership role.
Sure.
And I guess when I use the word leadership, I definitely also want to mention, every EMT is a leader. I absolutely believe that. I think that if you're in med school, law school, if you're a current EMT, you are indirectly or directly getting trained to be a leader. And I think it's especially daily, hourly, a thing in EMS where, you're leading the situation. Like that's your patient, that's your situation there. Uh, that's your case to lead. And, that's a super rewarding process. As everyone knows listening, it's also a very stressful process, and one that, has its ebbs and flows. But, it's having that kind of foresight to say, like, there's so much opportunity to innovate, collaborate in this space, and it's just getting kind of better and better as time goes on. So that kind of multifaceted approach to EMS, where you could be a provider, researcher, or as a broad umbrella term, kind of like an innovator.
So I'm sure there are 20 people that are listening to this that are like, this guy needs to graduate so I can hire him. First off, I'm sure the other half of people are thinking how refreshing it is. If there anything where my headspace is to hear you optimistic about this industry and about medicine and about healthcare. Obviously, we don't usually record. I think I'll release in the next few weeks, but there's a lot going on politically right now, right? We just had a national election, a lot of changes happening in our world. And I think sometimes the challenge is staying positive and seeing that kind of, the forest through the trees, or sometimes seeing the trees when you're in the forest, right? And so it's so refreshing to hear you say there's so much opportunity, and I see it. I think sometimes that's hard to see when you're in this small subset community, or you've been in this job for this long. When
Absolutely.
you say opportunity, I've heard you talk about research. I've
Yep.
heard you talk about obviously the clinical opportunities. What else do you see? What are people talking about at the collegiate level about the future of pre-hospital care and emergency services, Chris?
Yep. So a good example of this is a organization or company that actually is pretty involved with facilitating events and programming for our organization. So there's a company called Avive, and they're focused on innovative ways to address basically pre-hospital care, sudden cardiac arrest, where you need an AED. And they're making some amazing ways to go about doing this. A product that is under development right now that has just some amazing and just mind-blowing features that include like just really, really compact technology, much more reasonable price point, all these other integrative and innovative features that they have. And when we see organizations like that at our conference, or schools and captains of schools say like, oh wow, like, can I hear more about this? The optimism is there in the sense of, how can we collaborate with them when they're doing their trials or proof of concept. And when we know something is going to be the face of kind of a changing pre-hospital care environment, we're really fortunate to we have the ability to be at the front of that and have the ability to impact that and provide feedback for it. I think being student providers allows us also an opportunity that we're running our own squad, in the sense of, we have a budget, we have volunteers and folks, and we can integrate this technology as we want. And I think it speaks to the fact that we're able to kind of have that innovative sense of embracing, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. And I'm thinking to Avive, where that's clearly one that pops right out to me of something that gets a lot of squads excited about. If any college EMTs are listening, I'm sure they've heard of this company, or know of it, or would recognize it from the conference. So it's things like that are kind of getting college EMS providers optimistic about the future. And though I do sound like 100% optimistic, I definitely do want to acknowledge that the limitations are there in some capacities, but it's a matter of finding where the opportunities are to innovate and make the experience better for patients and make your lives, more enjoyable.
Chris, I don't think that's a college thing, right? I think there
No.
are every resource that we have, whether that's, and I talk about this a lot in my coaching, time, money, and energy are all limited resources. And we have to be really intentional with how we use them, and how we expend them, how we spend them. how we invest them. And so it's interesting to me to hear you say that, because I'm sure others listening are like, yeah, limitations is not a new concept. Like, get used to it, buddy, right? And that's just the way of the world. But
Right.
it's also great to hear you say that you guys are in a place where you can be on the forefront of what the future of EMS looks like. And as you graduate and as you move into a professional career in EMS, or in, fire department, or, whatever, population health, or a healthcare system, or
Sure.
there are so many paths, which is what I think is pretty cool about being engaged at a collegiate level. Who are the people that are involved in this national, EMS Foundation? Are they all EMS interested? Are most of them going to med school? Who are the people types
Yeah.
um, that are
Yeah.
drawn to this organization?
So the demographic's really interesting. It's almost always, but not always, students interested in medicine. And I think the reason for that is it's a really awesome way to learn about medicine and have that ability to, I mean, I'm trying to think of another experience where you can have patient care as a 19, 20, 21-year-old,
Yeah.
direct patient care, especially in an acute, like critical setting. And so the demographic, it's absolutely, it's motivated individuals and students that acknowledge there's a track laid out for, like I mentioned before, the biology, the chemistry, the calculus, that you have to check those boxes, which, that's not going away. That's a prereq to go through the process of that pre-med route, or pre-PA, pre-nursing, what have you. Then I think some folks want to say, like, well, what am I spending all this time for? What am I going to experience when I'm through the long education process?
Right.
And I think that it's not one particular personality type. I do think a lot of student providers are motivated, super organized, and more importantly, they're really willing to get out of their comfort zone. Transitioning to college is tough in and of itself. Going to college, especially during COVID, in and of itself is kind of tough. Throw in being a first responder. So if anyone has a situation on campus, you're the person who has to run that situation. And, that takes a certain personality to kind of say, I'm willing to embrace that, and I'm willing to learn how to handle those situations. And if I come up short in one of those, I want to learn what I did wrong, and learn from folks that could teach me the best way to go about that going forward.
Sure. Do you guys have, and I'm sure different departments and different organizations, or universities, colleges have different processes. Do you guys have a QA/QI process? Who runs medical direction for
Yep.
you?
Yeah,
If you don't mind kind of filling me into some of the operational things, I think
for
others
sure.
would be interested to learn that too.
Yep. So it really, really depends on the school. Smaller schools like mine, my school, Bryn Mawr College is another one close by. Skidmore College is like smaller in
Mhm.
size and kind of has a similar layout. And usually when you're at a smaller school, you have to partner with local ambulance services, to use their resources, use their medical director, because that's already in place and you're going to be collaborating with them anyway. At
Sure.
the larger schools, so I do a lot of work with UPenn's EMS squad, and their acronym is MERT. A lot of these schools have some interesting acronyms. Georgetown's is GERM, and and so Penn, for example, Georgetown, UCLA, all the larger schools usually have a program where it is a really robust 40, 50, 60 volunteer strong organization where you have two students that run as EMTs, but they focus on credentialing and teaching CPR classes to bring in revenue for the squad, to different departments on campus. You have students just dedicated to Narcan training or EpiPen training, so other students get that certification. Others just run budgeting, just run scheduling. And so, it's sort of like siloing those roles of student providers. And then because when they're at larger universities, they almost always have a medical system or university right there on campus. And so that's usually where your medical director comes from. And often it's actually usually an alum of the program. So
Mhm.
usually you have, the classic undergrad who goes to that med school, or maybe a different med school, comes back for residency, and now he or she is the medical director for his squad. So that's actually kind of a common and interesting thing, but it really does vary based on school size and obviously circumstances.
Right. One of the things that you just hit on, one of the hot topics kind of in the leadership realm is, what is leadership? And we've talked about it already. You hit the nail on the head that leadership is something that every clinically licensed person or credentialed person is at some point, maybe it's in their day, they're in a leadership role. But you've hit on something as a collegiate provider, that people that don't maybe go through that process, that jump straight in at 18, depending on the state, 21, right, that jump straight into EMS and didn't have that experience that you have now. Don't I think you said something that's really important. You're leading your peers. You guys are putting yourselves intentionally in roles where you don't have authority over the other people that you're training, but you've got to figure out how to find that
Right. And that's super
authority, respect, maybe, I could pick another couple words, but how do you personally navigate working alongside people and leading people from right next to them?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And it's actually it's a positive in so many ways. And a really good example of that is an editorial I actually wrote with a friend of mine for American Journal of Emergency Medicine. And it was about how college providers can play a critical role in kind of bringing out some misinformation and kind of setting some things straight in terms of vaping on campuses. So the beauty of what you just said is we're also students. So we have that respect in some capacity of being a peer, but there's the EMTA, what have you, that allows us to kind of have that other lens to it. And so, with the vaping concerns throughout campuses, and this was really prominent, as I think 2019, I think around like early 2019, when there was 1 million cases of just really severe complications from, some THC, like not spiked, but THC kind of added vaping devices. And so, a friend of mine who's also was an EMT, now he's heading to med school, but we were saying, we have a really interesting opportunity as student providers to educate peers about this, because, for lack of a better phrasing here, students aren't going to be too inclined listening to a PSA on TV or to a professor or administrator. They'll hear it more from a peer, though. And I think there's really impactful ways to use that appropriately. And, educating about things like vaping, or a lot of campuses are really getting involved with, student providers being really an integral part in contact tracing and a lot of COVID-19 related campus operations. And I think that's smart to do. I think it's really, it's a unique opportunity to have a student who has that ability to influence in a positive way other students.
Right. Well, and we talk about a few things here. COVID, you're talking about some of these like generational things. And,
Absolutely.
I out the gate, was talking about your age, and I'm usually the youngest one in the room. It's always been my career experience. I'm 33 now, so I'm not the youngest one anymore, but, I kind of, I'm used to that. But I think what you just hit on out of that is that you are of a different generation. You're Generation Z, right? You guys are behind millennial. You've got a different experience. You've got a different way of thinking. Your priorities are different. And the thing that I know about my, younger friends, peers, people, family, friends, I know you guys have a really incredible sense of social responsibility. And to hear you talk about, hey, I've got this opportunity with my peers in college to really spread this message, because I don't think you're wrong. I think that when people enter into the workforce, you kind of choose your path post college, or at least my experience with me and my peers were, you got to pick your path. And once you get so far into that path, it's really hard to navigate, switching careers, changing
Absolutely.
industries. Not impossible, but because it's more challenging and it's time consuming and it's difficult, people stay. So once people kind of pick their path, if their path isn't medicine, if their path isn't healthcare, if their path is finance, or if their path is real estate, or some other sector, they may never have the opportunity to really learn the research and the medicine. Because I think, to your point, once you graduate and you're being paid to do a thing, you don't have the luxury or the liberty anymore a lot of times.
Right. To pick and choose what you're interested in doing. You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to consume. And I think even then, and maybe my experience was different, but when I was in college, I feel like you're at a space, Chris, where you want to be a sponge and you want to learn and you want to grow. And I think you're evidence of that. They like, I think I'm interested in this thing. Let me go find out. Nope, schedule's awful. Don't want to do that. And then, but you're already kind of hooked because you learned something that was captivating. Which is that passion and that interest, and that is what I hope and pray that you never lose. And I know that when you integrate into systems and you really understand the why, you have an opportunity to stand on a platform and to share that knowledge and to advocate for things that if you never educated yourself wouldn't have had a chance to advocate for. So I commend you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And appreciate that you're sharing it. So you've got a whole lot going on, my friend. Like I said, I know that there's ways that we can support you. So you mentioned the conference that you guys go to. If people have an opportunity to plug into that, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. Definitely feel free to reach out. Check out my LinkedIn profile, Instagram, chris.gaeta3. And, happy to reach out and kind of collaborate really in any capacity through those two channels. So
Perfect.
yeah, thank you again. Go ahead.
Chris is Gaeta is Gaeta, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So ChrisGaeta. LinkedIn is how you and I got connected. Appreciate your time. I know we talked about a couple organizations. People are interested in that. Are there spaces, or do you have any need for people to collaborate on research projects or anything along those
Absolutely.
lines in a journal?
Yep. So there's definitely a couple spaces for not only from a research side, which absolutely is robust, and happy to talk about that more. So definitely feel free to reach out in that capacity, but also from organizational side. So we do a ton of partnerships for product sponsorships and kind of collaborations really in any capacity with nonprofits, for-profits, and a whole host of things. I think, like we mentioned throughout the podcast, we're really fortunate to have a super targeted and deep-rooted connection with a lot of these providers who read our content, who are interested in our content. And I'm happy to kind of talk more through ways for organizations, individuals to engage with research or really any other opportunities.
Sure. And we hit on mentorship. So I'm hearing if somebody wants to collaborate, to research, read an article, where do they find your article? I know you mentioned, you said the
vaping article. So it's in the American, last acronym of the day, I promise. AGEM, so American Journal of Emergency Medicine. I think that was published a couple months ago. And that was solely focused on how college providers can advocate as student kind of voices to abate or decrease the spread of misinformation about e-cigarette use on campuses.
I love that. I love that. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing. For my listeners, I hope that you guys take the opportunity to connect with Chris. And I wish you the best of luck in your career, my friend. If there's anything anybody can do to support you, I know that's who my listeners are, right? That's who my network and people I call my people are just like you, interested in helping others, supporting a cause, and really that purpose-driven person. So if there's anything we can do for you, let us know. And thank you for being with me tonight, Chris.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Brett.